Hello. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to your girl. Alright, so we want to start off by saying love all y'all for watching. Hello to all my new subscribers. Hello to all my old subscribers. And big ups to everybody on the planet Earth. Alright, so we're going to just continue on with the weather that we've been talking about. You know, this weather modification. I don't care what you want to call it, but I'm telling you what it is, okay? Alright, so we're going to start off by showing the clip from the Weather Channel. We got some crazy ass hail falling from the sky. So much hail that the roads get flooded. Now you tell me if that's ordinary. That ain't no ordinary shit, my man. That is some shit that the government has put on these motherfuckers to see what's going to happen. They testing this shit out on us. Alright, you know, let's just keep it real until you wake up. You're just going to keep thinking I'm a conspiracy theory. Alright, well, we also have, you know about those chemtrails? Well, how about we got a video of these motherfuckers trying to tell us that this shit is normal. Yeah, normal. Okay, you trying to tell me it's normal? Alright, well, we got some clips here today that's going to make your ass laugh. Make your eyebrows go up. Okay? And then we're going to have a little bit of footage from what happened in Harvey. You know what I mean? The Weather Channel, they just showing you what's coming in store. And then, yes, we have our man, Mr. Long, from FEMA. Yeah, we haven't heard from that nigga in a while. So Mr. Long is out, and he's going to tell us about what's going on. You know, talking about the FEMA administration and everything. Well, enough of me talking. Thanks for tuning in, and enjoy the show, my love.
Exeter, England, July 2014. An unnatural glowing rectangle sits in the sky, and weird patterns are appearing right across the globe. Fiery snakes, zigzags, loops, swirls, and right angles. Conspiracy theories are running wild. Could the military be manipulating the weather through electromagnetic weaponry? Could the government be releasing chemicals into the atmosphere with sinister motives? Uncovering the truth is Sigrid Close from Stanford University. These are contrail clouds.
I would highly suggest to anyone that if they're learning something off the internet, to not believe these conspiracy theories. As an engineer and a scientist, I find it particularly frustrating because the science is exciting and wonderful in and of itself. The exhaust vapor coming off of the airplane associated with the engines is the predominant source of contrails that we see in the sky. So there's absolutely nothing dangerous about these contrail clouds.
As an aircraft flies through the moist, freezing upper atmosphere, its engines release water vapor and exhaust particles. The air becomes saturated, the water vapor condenses, then freezes, and a condensation trail of cloud forms. But in certain circumstances, some truly bizarre clouds may appear. As Gavin Preter-Pinney explains.
Contrails don't always form in the straight lines. Sometimes you see them in circles or spirals, and this can happen when planes are in a holding pattern.
Some shapes are even weirder. Contrails only form in the atmosphere's moist layers. So if an aircraft passes in then out of a moist layer, the contrail may appear to switch on and off. Over time, they could spread out into spectacular rectangular shapes. But contrails can also be seen forming giant loops, arcing through the skies.
This is usually the result of planes waiting to come into land. As they go round and round at different altitudes, it can be passing from a contrailed layer of the atmosphere into a drier layer below where no contrail forms.
When contrails are straight, they may be affected by the wind. They can slowly drift or be quickly blown into strange and unexpected shapes. So wherever and whatever shapes are appearing in the sky, it's not a conspiracy, it's condensation.
You mentioned earlier that you're a pilot.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about chemtrails. We hear a lot about that. What are those, and are they for real?
Well, when you look into that and ask questions, they say, oh yeah, contrails. No, contrails are behind a jet. If you see a jet flying very high, the stripe, the condensed stripe behind it, that's normal. But in areas I've first observed where there's very little population, you see a jet airplane going, and it's not then this way, this way, this way, this way. And when you inquire about it, ask people, you recognize that the real climate change scientists are truly ticked off, because apparently nobody really is asking them. It's the special interest, in my opinion, it's the oil industry, the energy industry, that are blowing smoke up somebody's you know what, and telling them that we have to lay a pattern up there to prevent sun energy from hitting Earth. And what they're doing in there, it's now pretty much determined. They're putting in the aluminum, barium, and strontium. Now you take these chemicals and run them through a PubMed literature search in respect to human health, you will find more than 3,000 papers. Aluminum alone, aluminum Alzheimer's, right, mental, papers. Aluminum alone, aluminum Alzheimer's, right, mental, there's no question about it. Now it so happens, when there were people who really paid attention, if there was due to some weather and air changes, wind patterns, suddenly this stuff what they're laying out there, it comes down in rain. If it falls on crops, it kills the crops. It's like they have big blisters on any one of the crops, vegetables or things like this. Organic crops, vegetables or things like this. Organic crops, totally destroyed, can't even use them. And when it comes to an area, for example, there's like forests, after that, a few weeks after that, they're totally dead. They're toothpicks, and you can see it all on the internet, right? And you can go, in order to be up to date, you look at my book, The Lifelong Health, or go to my website, drhanskugler.com. A good thing also in general to stay up to
Alright, so as you heard from Grandpa, ex-pilot, that shit is real. Don't believe what these people out here on the news trying to tell us, and on these weather channels trying to tell us shit thinking we dumb as fuck. I don't believe that. Let me tell you, I had a garden. I was putting new gardens in there every 2 to 3 weeks because it looked like somebody was burning my shit. Meanwhile, it was the chemtrails. No, wasting money. Don't do it. Now we have a video from in Colombia. Yeah, hailstorm like a mug out there. Alright, so we're gonna run this clip. This happened in 2015. They was already doing that shit. It's just that a lot of us wasn't woken up yet. We was so prioritized by doing, our daily shit and having fun with the world and living our lives. Well, we had to slow down and wake the fuck up, and this is what's going on in the world. Take a look at this clip.
Bogota, Colombia, March 2015. Tropical Bogota is used to unpredictable weather, but locals are still in for a shock. Freezing hail batters the city, piling up to 24 inches in some areas. It damages roofs, engulfs homes, and sends people running for safety. It is a scene barely imaginable in a country so close to the equator. George Karunas has first-hand experience of this icy force.
It's overwhelming, it's so loud, just the noise. And as the hailstones get bigger, the force increases. So now you're getting dents. The windows are smashing. Sometimes it sounds like there's a gorilla pounding on the roof.
With March temperatures in Bogota reaching an average high of over 67 degrees, freezing hail is a chilling and stark contrast. But there's worse. As tons of hail start to melt, it overwhelms the city with frigid floodwaters.
All the streets and sidewalks are completely covered in asphalt and concrete. It can't just be absorbed by the ground. And that's what makes this so much worse.
Locals battle to cope with the deluge of hail and floods. The country is unprepared for such conditions, but such conditions are not completely unpredictable. Ari Sarsalari pinpoints the causes.
there are a lot of things going just right in this storm to produce that much rain and that much hail. First of all, you just need a lot of moisture. I mean, there's got to be a huge amount of moisture content in the air on that day.
Colombia sits in the tropics and is guaranteed to be humid for much of the year. But moisture alone cannot be enough to cause this horrific hail.
The higher levels in the atmosphere could be a little bit cooler, and it could just be really hot at the surface that day. Of course, that would lead to rising air, and that, of course, would lead to a big thunderstorm like this one.
Wow.
At the top of a storm cloud, temperatures drop below freezing. Water turns to ice and starts to fall, but the upward motion of air pushes it back up. More water freezes to the ice, increasing it in size. Eventually, it is too heavy for the air to support, and it falls as hail.
But in this storm, I think what happened was it probably had a little bit of a weaker updraft, so the particles didn't stay suspended that high up in the storm for very long. So they just dropped this smaller hail. But there was so much moisture in this storm that these smaller pieces of hail kind of mixed with the rain, and it all happened in just one area very, very fast.
The flood of hail in 2015 proves disastrous, but hail like this has struck before. In 2007, an epic storm brings over 4 feet of hail and rain in just hours. In some areas, traffic is trapped by the freezing slush. With women and children needing urgent rescue, locals improvise as best they can. Miraculously, no lives were lost, but locals will be praying that storms like these don't come again anytime soon.
The amount of hail that came down was not just extraordinary, it was total catastrophe for Bogota.
Okay, now, so, don't go nowhere. Hey, you. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Don't even think about walking away. If you're watching on your phone, just carry me along with you wherever you go. I ain't gonna see shit. Took me a while to do all this to get this information out to you, so you're gonna watch this thing to the end and listen to the end, my friend. Alright, now we done talked about them doing the chemtrails, and they already said that the conspiracy theory think it's weather modification. Weather weaponry, yeah. So they already putting it blatantly in our faces. Alright, so now we're going to continue on to, we got a little clip of what they say, how hurricane happened and what is the purpose of these hurricanes. Well, I understand the purpose of them, but we all know what y'all doing, okay? Now, I don't feel like talking too much, you know what I'm saying? We got a lot of shit to put out here today. Alright, so we're going to also do a clip from, they found, unfortunately, a lot of flood victims in Houston, so we're going to do that clip. And then we're going to finally round it up with our friend Long. Yeah, the FEMA guy. So, you already know you want to listen in closely. Alright, let's continue.
Families are waking up with new concerns about rising waters threatening their homes. Areas that have already seen record rainfall got hit with yet another round of strong storms. And new this morning, that means a lot of washed out roads and plenty to clean up.
Well, ever been stranded on a mountain before?
The water came over its banks and left people stuck from North Georgia to Maryland Thursday. Flash flood emergencies were issued as heavy rain fell across parts of the South and Mid-Atlantic. Many of those areas already drenched by what was Tropical Storm Alberto making its way north. That's prompting businesses to make tough calls in order to keep people safe.
It's just the safety of everybody, the people going, of our first responders. We just want to keep everybody safe.
The strong storms even prompted another warning in flood-ravaged Ellicott City, Maryland. The town just beginning to get a start on the cleanup efforts from Sunday's deadly and historic flooding. In North Carolina, homes and parks like this one turned into islands. The state's governor got an up-close look at the damage caused by mudslides in the mountains. At least 2 people were killed Wednesday when the side of a hill crashed down on a home. Emergency crews searching for missing people in Virginia, trying to do what they can to keep more people from becoming victims.
through your help, actually, we're trying to just get the word out, again, to be safe, don't venture out, hunker down, and let's try to work with it.
And by the way, rivers around Albemarle are still running high. Crews will resume their search this morning for that missing person. Meanwhile, all Albemarle County schools are on a 2-hour delay this morning.
In Walnut Bend, what's really odd, this is a beautiful suburb that we have, subdivision outside of Houston. Every other house is, well, all the houses have been affected, but every other home is vacant. It's really bizarre. The home you see right behind me actually had water that went up right to the light post that you see right outside the front door, which would be right to about my chin or so. Came right through the house from Buffalo Bayou, is flooded, and still the house remains a work in progress. It's interesting, when you have a tornado and a tornado causes structural damage, usually you have just the whole thing can be demolished. You can see it, but when it comes to flooding, when the waters recede, the structure's still there. So it's a bit of a, it's kind of a mystery as to how things happen to look inside, and we're going to take a peek in there later on this morning. But when it comes to Harvey making its landfall back late August of last year, when it came on through like a wrecking ball, it broke a lot of hearts, and certainly a lot of lessons were learned. This could be a neighborhood anywhere in the U.S., but it's not. This is Walnut Bend subdivision in Houston, devastated by a deluge of water from Hurricane Harvey. That was 10 months ago.
Hurricane Harvey for us was a very, very unwanted memory in our family. Saturday night, my son, who is 8 years old, went to bed and said, "Mommy, are we going to flood?" And I said, "No." Every time it rains, I think that, and him telling me that.
It impacted our entire county in a way that we'd never seen before. Most of our infrastructure was underwater.
Lauren Cropper and her family survived the storm, but their home was inundated with water.
So our high water mark in our home is right here. You can see it's about at my shoulders. This is our home.
Half the homes in her subdivision are empty. About 30,000 were displaced because of Harvey, but local officials are looking at ways to better prepare for another potential disaster.
One of the biggest lessons we've learned is communication. It's not that we didn't have good communication, it was not always the message was reaching the people who needed it.
What we're going to do moving forward is I hope we can change our community's perspective about disasters. It's not if it happens, it's when it's going to happen.
And Lauren will definitely have a different plan going into this year's hurricane season.
I hope there's never a next time, but if there is, I don't think the kids and I and my husband will stay here during it. We'll probably get everything secured and leave town or go somewhere where we know that we're safe.
People are on edge, and I think when you see a typical thunderstorm here that you see in any summer in Houston, genuine concerns going into this hurricane season.
You know, Stephanie, you think about how the script may have been different had this been a system that could have just launched its way farther deeper in the United States and been a quick mover, still causing damage, still causing loss of life. But the idea that it's set up over this region and dumped rainfall for about 4 or 5 days, in some places like Nederland getting up to 60 inches of rainfall, how different things could have been if it had been again, not say up stationary, but just a quick mover.
Yeah.
Hard to believe. It's destroyed by the flood waters now. They're fixing it back up, and hopefully the family's going to move back in. But again, it's dealing with the past to make sense of what may be happening, what could happen in the future. If you go back in time a little bit, it was on the night of the 25th and 26th of August, late night, early morning. I was on the air in Victoria, Texas, and I was speaking to a great man that we're about to join right now, and that is the police chief of Houston, Texas, Art Acevedo. And Art, you and I were on the phone, and as we were having a conversation, that's when we had the first reports of people being evacuated from rooftops as the floodwaters were moving into Buffalo Bayou and all across the greater Houston area. I have to ask you, sir, how have you been from that moment? How has life been for you?
Well, I mean, good morning. Good talking to you. It's been busy working with our department and the mayor and the council to look at how we can, what steps we can take to try to mitigate the flood risk here in Houston, Texas. And for us as first responders, what can we do to do a better job next time? It's also been tough to see our people spending almost a year now. Not every single one of us even been able to finish rebuilding their homes. There's so many impacted, and labor is an issue in Texas right now with so much need.
You know, when you took the office, when you took your oath, you raised your hand and you took an oath to protect, and that's your number one job, is trying to keep people safe. Your officers, same thing. Any of your officers and their families, were they affected by the flooding?
We had 600 members of our department whose homes were flooded. I'm so proud of the fact that, you know, we put the entire department on 24-hour shifts. We didn't let anybody go home for over 6 days. They were required to stay at work, and while they were out trying to save strangers, which we'll get paid to do, their own families were being rescued in other parts of the greater Houston area. And I'm proud to say that not one of those men or women, you know, ran away from work. They stayed there. They did a heck of a job, and they saved thousands of lives, and it's something we're really proud of.
I know training and preparedness is a very big thing in the Houston Police Department, but how can you prepare? How can you train for something of this magnitude?
Constantly warming and cooling, and the weather is how Earth actually maintains its stability. It's a delicate balancing act, especially when it comes to hurricanes. Dangerous, destructive, deadly. Hurricanes are part of the balancing act of the world's weather. The unexpected benefits of hurricanes are seldom discussed, but part of why they exist. Hurricanes can be thought of as massive heat engines, taking incredible amounts of heat out of the tropical oceans and transporting that heat into the polar regions of the globe, helping to balance the Earth's temperature. Hurricanes can also ease drought and replenish water supplies. And for our oceans, hurricanes churn up the ocean depths. Rising cold water brings essential nutrients to feed tiny organisms, including phytoplankton, which produce almost half the oxygen we breathe. While hurricanes can be largely destructive, they're all just a piece of the balancing act of our atmosphere. Now, has helped him lead FEMA through 2017's destructive hurricane season, and he says that challenge will help him guide FEMA in the future. There's still always so much to learn, right? So what would you say was the most challenging part of your first year?
I learn every day in this job. The challenging part is that FEMA's mission is incredibly complex. I've inherited a great agency, people that are truly dedicated, but the complex nature of this mission is tough to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
So not only do we have to respond, you know, to hurricanes or volcanoes or wildfires, but we also have a very complex national continuity mission for nation-state threats and making sure that the nation can continue to work on its worst day.
So what do you think you're going to take from your first year, what you've learned, and how you can apply it and make changes for your second year?
So we're pushing forward with a lot of new initiatives. Specifically, we've created a new strategic plan that's informed by 2017, but also by our constituents. And there's 3 very simple but ambitious goals that we're putting forward. The focus is going to be on creating a true culture of preparedness, readying the nation for catastrophic disasters, and reducing the complexity of FEMA. And what I mean by reducing the complexity is we've got to streamline the services that we provide to disaster survivors, but also grantees, because we pump out billions of dollars to rebuild communities.
How does this get distributed? How do you make sure it's going to where it needs to go, and how do we know where it needs to go?
Well, it's a very complicated process, but we design the permanent work into various categories. And you know, for example, Category A is debris removal. Category B is reimbursing for emergency responses. Category E is fixing uninsured public facilities and replacing contents.
Okay.
So we'll be, you know, working to rebuild the roadway infrastructure. We're making the power grid more resilient, to rebuilding and looking at schools that were damaged or the hospital system. So it's a comprehensive effort. Right now, it's a regressive program that I've been asking Congress to take a look at and help us fix, because you know, you've got to get hit by a major disaster declaration to obtain access to hundreds of millions of dollars of post-disaster mitigation grant funding. That's not the right formula. So what we're asking for is creating that formula, pushing forward and working with the Congress to say, how do we do pre-disaster mitigation up front? Because $1 in pre-disaster mitigation is the equivalent of saving $6 on the back end.
Wow. Irma and Harvey, we need to talk about those two. FEMA stays in these areas for years after.
Right. So right now, we have over 690 open disasters that the agency's working on, and I don't think a majority of Americans understand that. we're taxed. We're constantly trying to help multiple communities. And while Harvey, Irma, and Maria were all impacting, we were also dealing with two of the world's worst urban wildfires in California. We had disasters in over 30 states that we were working simultaneously this year. Basically, in 2017, FEMA picked up a new event every 3 days, whether it was a wildfire or a declared event. And so, with that, the challenges of this job is your operational capacity doesn't expand necessarily. Your internal operational capacity to deal with this doesn't expand with the number of disasters. And so we're trying to hit the reset button on focusing on whole community disaster response and recovery and mitigation. It requires all of us. And what we learned from Harvey was great from the standpoint of not only was FEMA helping to coordinate the federal asset, but we saw neighbor helping neighbor, and that's exactly what's needed. We're pushing forward what we're calling FEMA integration teams. I'm asking my team to get out of the headquarters offices, out of our regional offices, and embed with state, local, and tribal agencies as much as we can. Now, this is going to be phased, but the problem with FEMA is that most of the time our dedicated employees are only seen in the recovery realm where everything is contentious. You're dealing with people that have lost everything they've worked for, and it's always a contentious relationship. We've got to change that internally to where we're having these conversations on blue sky days. I want to be a part of the discussion every day. I want to help design the plans, do the training and exercise, but also execute for any level of event that goes forward and provide our technical expertise or the firepower of the federal government. I believe the key to resiliency resides at the local level of government with local elected officials and state officials. They've got to pass building codes. They've got to be smart about land use planning. And until that's done, FEMA's job is only going to be more complex as we're impacted more and more.
Hear more from FEMA Administrator Brock Long as our special coverage of hurricane season 2018 continues. In our next hour, they say we could see anywhere from 10 to 16 named storms overall.
Yeah, but you know what? It only takes really one big storm to make an impact. FEMA Administrator Brock Long says the agency aims to create a culture of preparedness.
If you look back to the 1992 hurricane season when Andrew hit, if I remember correctly, there were only 7 named storms that year.
And there was the A storm was in August, right?
Right.
So
with Andrew. So it only takes one.
Okay, let's talk more a little bit about, state needs versus federal needs here. And you guys getting in ahead of the game. You recently said at a governor's conference, and I quote, "I can't guarantee that we can be right on time to backfill everything you need." Put that in a little bit of context. And now how you're making changes.
Yeah, so, I'm having honest conversations because I don't think a lot of people understand FEMA's role and what we're capable of. And the bottom line is we have never been designed to be the first responder or the primary responder. And we are opening up dialogue with our state and local partners, and I believe that they're receptive to this of saying we have to reconfigure the baseline capabilities at the state and local level of emergency management, and that our support from FEMA should be designed to backfill and help a governor achieve their response and recovery goals. They're not my response and recovery goals, but a governor's ultimately down to the local level. And what we're asking them to do is bolster pre-event contracts, from staff augmentation to logistical contracts for generators to provide emergency power to, say, hospitals,
right.
Or to be able to provide food and water. Preparedness is everybody's responsibility. And part of our new strategic plan with creating a true culture of preparedness is recognizing that citizens are the true first responder for every emergency. If you face an emergency, whether it's a medical emergency or the aftermath of a hurricane, typically the citizen is going to find themselves in a situation where they have to take emergency action first before the help arrives.
Right. Have you had to do any different training just from what you experienced last season coming into this season?
We have to bolster training. We've got to reconfigure how we do training internally as an agency. But when it comes to the citizen, we're asking them to, look at getting a skill. We have to figure out how to prepare citizens from a low to no cost standpoint to the optimal way. But if we start, with educating and training citizens, it's, 1 in 4 of us, according to the Red Cross, is going to do CPR in our lifetime. So we've got to resurrect, CPR, life safety, first aid. How do we teach people to shut off gas valves, water valves, properly checking on their neighbor and being that true first responder.
Yeah.
So we got to refocus the citizen training as well as our own internal.
How will you hit the reset button on resiliency? Because, a lot of people end up having hurricane fatigue, especially after last year. So how do you rally the troops to be like, all right, guys, we got to get ready again.
Well, one of the things that we most recently did is we're combining the federal, our mitigation programs, our national preparedness programs, and our continuity programs into one office called the Office of Resiliency. First, it starts at our federal level of saying we've got to make sure that all of the directorates within FEMA are in a unified effort going forward on how we truly initiate community resilience. Next, it's got to filter all the way down through again to the citizen through public education, but then more importantly, getting Congress to change the funding on pre-disaster mitigation. But what we're doing now in FEMA is focused on outcome-driven recovery. So it used to be FEMA only really had the authorities to rebuild a community to the pre-disaster condition, which makes no sense. It enables us to do outcome-driven recovery of saying, Governor, what is your vision for a more resilient Texas, Puerto Rico, Colorado, whatever it may be? And then we can put the funding towards meeting those goals so that we don't find ourselves back in the same situation.
Yeah. Let's talk about your budget for 2019. Any special requests or differences that you're asking for?
Well, so our budget's pretty complicated. So we have our baseline budget. The problem with our baseline budget is that typically, here again, the operational budget doesn't grow with the number of events that we have to deal with. But when it comes to the Disaster Relief Fund, Congress has been very responsive.
Good.
They've passed supplementals. We have great communication with the Congress when we get to a critical point of funding recovery programs. That they've been able to pass supplementals pushing forward, but we got to solve the problem through mitigation so that we don't keep going through this supplemental process again and again and again.
You're doing a lot of work, and I'm really excited for the future with you. At the helm of FEMA, and a lot of changes. It seems like you're making some really positive changes. So thank you so much, Administrator.
I appreciate it.
Really.
All right, everyone, that was Barack Long from FEMA. All right, so you already know how I feel about that man and FEMA. If you don't, then scroll on along through my episodes here, and you shall see FEMA, warnings about FEMA. All right, and then I'll put you up to date. All right, so we done talked about hurricanes, things that's going on in the city, how hurricanes were made, well, why they happen, not why they're made, why they happen. Oh, actually, you know what? Yeah, why they are made, because they're fucking man-made. Okay? They are natural out there. There are natural hurricanes out there too, folks. Don't get me wrong. I know this. I'm just saying the ones that are coming around lately is not global warming. All right? If you don't believe me, then why don't you try that movie Geostorm? That should really put your ass up to date and shock the shit out of you. Alright, so we done went through everything. Alright, so I guess that is the end of our show. I would like to thank you all for tuning in. And as we usually say on this show when we sign off, love, peace, and hair grease. Love you for watching. And don't forget to leave your comments below.